everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all doing really well. Today I'm coming at you with my lockdown recent reads part 2. If you missed part 1, I will leave it linked around so that you can go and check it out after you've watched this one if you would like. In that video I chatted about why I haven't been uploading over the past couple of months, and I gave you some mini reviews of some of the books that I read during lockdown. As I read quite a few books during lockdown, I'm splitting this into 2, and the reviews are a little snappier than usual just to help us get through them. I will also put a link to my last video, which was a non-fiction book haul, which included some books from Black authors and books about the racial divide and the violence that is committed towards Black people in today's society. There are also some links to some helpful resources attached to that video if you are wanting to learn more and better support the Black Lives Matter movement, and so that will all be around if you want to go and check that out. So once we are all caught up on my lockdown recent reads, I should be continuing my normal monthly recent reads videos. That is the plan. I also have a few other videos planned that I am very excited to film for you all, including some Pride Month recommendations and some poetry recommendations, as well as a video talking about my most anticipated releases for the second half of the year, which is very exciting. So in terms of the books that I'm going to be talking about today, they are good. 4 of the books are 5-star reads and 3 of the books are 4.5-star reads, so some of these are definitely going to be favourites of the year. So let's get into them. So the first book that I'm going to be talking about today is Expectation by Anna Hope. This is a contemporary literary fiction novel following the lives of 3 women who were best friends when they were younger, living in East London. Their lives full of romance and activism and art. And then we also look at them all 10 years later when none of them are quite where they wanted to be. I was sent this proof copy of this book last year and I should have got around to picking it up sooner. I absolutely loved it. This book explores growing up and personal development. It looks at what it is to be a mother and a daughter and a partner and a friend. But above all, this book explores what it is that constitutes a meaningful life, what it is that makes you feel as though you are living a happy and fulfilled life. There was a really nice quote that I read about this book that said that this book explores the liminal space between expectation and reality, full of desires and dreams and pain, where we all live our lives, and that is spot on. This was largely done in the book through the medium of friendship. It really looks at what friendship is and how we can value and care for our friends, but how we can be really jealous of our friends as well. And I don't think that is something that is explored in novels in friendships all that much, and that was really interesting to read about. So I thoroughly enjoyed this. It had great characters, great themes, great writing. It wasn't perfect. There were a few little niggles that I had with it, but overall I thought it was really great and definitely something people should be considering reading this summer. So in the end I gave this one 4.5 stars. Next I read The Most Fun We Ever Had by Claire Lombardo. This was my favourite book that I read on this year's Women's Prize long list. There was another book that came quite close and I will actually be talking about that one next, but this one was all me. This is an epic literary fiction family saga type novel set over multiple generations. It follows a couple who are still madly in love after 40 years of marriage and their 4 daughters who are all very different from one another and all dealing with their own personal struggles. So I loved everything about this. If I had to write a wish list of what I like in a literary fiction novel, this had it all. It is chunky, it is family and relationship focused, it focuses on different characters' story threads, it is set over multiple decades. I know I have said all of this so many times before, I am very predictable, but it is true. So this is basically exactly what you would expect and what you would hope for from this kind of novel with this kind of premise. It didn't disappoint me in any area. I loved all of the characters. The parents in particular were just the best. Their relationship was so spot on. It was so genuine and flawed, but just so loving and earnest and inspiring. I loved witnessing all of the characters' interactions and all of their individual struggles. We tackled things such as grief and adolescence and infidelity. The writing was lovely. It had those wow moments that you'd come across every now and again that were so insightful, and it felt like they knew you. I don't know, I could just talk about this book for so much longer, but I am very aware of the amount of books I've got to get through. So rest assured that I think this book is brilliant. If you like these kind of novels, then definitely try this one out. You will not be disappointed. And in the end, I gave this one 5 stars. The next book that I read was Hamlet by Maggie O'Farrell. This is my favourite other book on the Women's Prize list, and considering that this is the only one that made it onto the shortlist, not bitter. This is the one that I am rooting for to win. This is a historical novel that follows the life of Shakespeare's family in the 1580s in Warwickshire. We follow his wife Agnes, who is somewhat feared in the community due to her unusual gifts, as well as their children, including the young Hamlet. I'm sure you are all sick by now of hearing the abundance of praise that this book is receiving, but I will just throw in my little 2 cents. This is a gorgeous, superbly crafted, touching book, and I found it to be beautiful. The main thing that stood out to me here was the characterization. I absolutely loved that we got to focus on Agnes and her experiences and her as a character. Shakespeare himself is only ever referred to as the father or the husband or the man, so this really is about Agnes's family. She was such an awesome character. She felt so real to me, and the themes that were explored through her character, such as grief in particular, were so powerful. The writing in here is also so special. The prose feels very traditional, but at the same time distinctive somehow. It's very descriptive and poetic. The imagery, especially when it comes to nature, is so strong. It's quite hard for me to put my finger on what exactly about this novel made it so special, but it all just came together so wonderfully for me. It provided me with a very rich, all-encompassing reading experience. Again, there is a lot more to be said about this one, but in essence, it deserves all of the praise that it is getting. Just go and watch someone else's better review of it. And in the end, I gave this one 5 stars. Next, I picked up My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell, and this is a book that I was highly anticipating at the beginning of this year. This one follows the story of a woman called Vanessa who was sexually assaulted by her English teacher when she was 15. Years later, Vanessa is called on to speak out against him, as previous other ex-students of his are doing. So of course, this book comes along with big content warnings for sexual assault and sexual assault of a minor, so please bear that in mind. So overall, I really enjoyed this book. It is told through dual timelines. One of the timelines focuses on Vanessa while she was in school, and the other timeline focuses on her as an older woman in modern day. And this was the perfect way to structure this book, in my opinion. It was very interesting and very important to hear about Vanessa's feelings surrounding her abuse while she was in those 2 very different situations. Vanessa's character development in here was confusing and complex, believably so. From my own admittedly limited understanding and experience, I think this book did a pretty good job of addressing a lot of the nuances that can be involved in this kind of situation. It did definitely ultimately show how speaking out against your abuser is not necessarily a clear or straightforward thing, which I think was definitely the aim. In terms of the writing, it wasn't particularly special. While I appreciated the characters in here, none of them were likable, and I didn't feel myself to be particularly connected to any of them, interestingly. But the book definitely kept my attention all the way through. I wanted to keep reading and keep learning more, and it definitely did make me reflect on these issues of victimhood and agency and consent, which is really, really important. So I'd say it's definitely worth picking up, and in the end, I gave this one 3.5 stars. Next, I read North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell. I finally picked up some Elizabeth Gaskell. It was about bloody time. This follows a young woman named Margaret Hale who is uprooted from her comfortable life in the south of England when her family moved to a northern industrial town. Here, Margaret is made aware of the poverty and suffering faced by the mill workers as she embarks on a complicated relationship with a rich mill owner. So I knew that I was going to love Elizabeth Gaskell. I just knew it, and of course I did. I loved the story story. It is coming of age, social and political commentary, and romance all in one. My favourite kind of 19th century literature. I absolutely loved the characters in here. Margaret in particular was one of the best protagonists I have read about in a very long time. She is stubborn but so selfless at the same time. I just loved watching her learn and grow and develop this real sense of social justice. She definitely fucks up sometimes, and I relate. The writing in here is delightful. It was surprisingly readable. I found Gaskell to be so much more readable than the Brontes or even Jane Austen. Her writing just seemed to make sense to me for some reason. So this is known to be Gaskell's most political work, and it was definitely very political, but I didn't find it to be off-puttingly so. It was very clear in laying out the different sides of the arguments surrounding industry and capitalism at the time, and I found it to be really interesting. So overall, this was just an absolute delight for me. It was everything that I hoped it would be. And while I did give this one a full 5-star rating, I actually think I'm going to enjoy some of her other novels more, just based on subject matter alone. But that is a discovery for another day, so suffice to say that I gave North and South 5 stars. Next, I picked up Tin Man by Sarah Winman. This was actually a reread for me. If you didn't know, Tin Man is one of my favourite books of all time. It is incredible. This is a short literary fiction novel that follows 2 men, Ellis and Michael, who have been best friends ever since they met as boys in Oxford. The book is told from multiple perspectives, it jumps around in time, and ultimately we get to build up a picture of these 2 men and their relationship with one another. So I don't need to go into this book all over again. I have gushed about it plenty of times before, but just know that this book is perfect to me, and rereading it has just confirmed for me all over again how perfect it is. The writing is sparse and impeccably chosen. The characters feel so real and their experiences so deep and raw without Sarah Winman having to spell everything out for us. And ultimately, this is just one of the most accurate and sensitive accounts of love and friendship ever. Reading this book is such a beautiful, emotional experience for me. I cannot recommend it more highly. So of course I gave this one 5 stars. Next, I picked up a poetry collection, and that was Tell Me the Truth About Life, a National Poetry Day anthology curated by Keris Matthews. So this is a poetry collection that Cameron picked up for me at some point from somewhere. It was made to celebrate the 25th anniversary of National Poetry Day, and it includes a selection of poems from various people, from astronauts to famous musicians to teachers. So I enjoyed this. It is always nice to read poetry anthologies because they expose me to poets and poems that I have never read before. This one does include a fairly good range of different voices from different parts of the world and different periods in history. I definitely did discover a couple of poems in here that I hadn't read before that I really loved, but my favourite ones that I found were ones that I already knew. Overall, I wouldn't say that this poetry collection blew me away. I didn't feel particularly attached to it, but it's definitely a nice way to try out some new poetry, and it was certainly enjoyable whilst I read it. So in the end, I gave this one 3.5 stars. Next, I picked up another poetry collection, and that one was Sincerity by Carol Ann Duffy. If you've seen any of my videos about poetry before, you probably know that Carol Ann Duffy is my favourite poet ever. She is incredible. This is just another one of her collections that I hadn't read yet. There are a ton. So this was her final collection as a poet laureate, and it is claimed to be chiefly about loss and remembrance. As is typical of her work, this collection explores wider political and social themes as well as more personal experiences. So this wasn't my favourite Carol Ann Duffy collection, unfortunately. It didn't touch me like some of the other ones have, but I did still love reading it. She just knows how to use language and sound and rhythm and imagery together so perfectly, and while her poetry is so unendingly complex with so many layers of meaning to them that just continue to blow me away, I feel like she always offers you something to take away from a poem, even if you have no idea what she is talking about. Like, even if you're brand new to poetry and you've never analysed a poem before in your life, there is, in one sense, such simplicity to her poems that I feel like you could just enjoy the sound, or you could just pick out one piece of beautiful imagery. I don't know if any of that makes sense to anyone but me, but just know that I love Carol Ann Duffy. Poets do not come better than her. While this wasn't my favourite, she is such a talent, and in the end I gave this one 3.5 stars. Next, I picked up The Help by Catherine Stockett. This was actually a recommendation from my sister. She read this book a few years ago and loved it, and I finally picked it up, and I'm really pleased that I did. This book is set in the 1960s in Southern America, and it focuses on a young white woman who decides to write a book with two black women about what it is like to be the help. Black women who work as maids for white families. So I enjoyed basically everything about this reading experience. I loved the three main characters and all of their different personalities. We got to read from all three of their perspectives in their own voices, and this made the text come alive so much more. I will quickly add here that I did notice that this author is white. I don't know basically anything about her or that situation, but I do think that is something to bear in mind while you're reading from these various perspectives. I found the storyline in here to be brilliant. It was so great to follow. Obviously, there are these overarching themes of race and privilege that run throughout the novel that makes it quite shocking and upsetting to read at times. I know that the book is based quite heavily in fact, but it was just told with such honesty and bluntness and tenderness all at once. I found the reading experience to be really quite affecting. So this book just really came together for me. I thought it was very well thought through, a really great balance between entertaining and raw and hard-hitting, and in the end I gave this one 4.5 stars. The penultimate book that I'm going to be talking about today is Daughter of the Forest by Juliette Marillier. This is a historical fantasy novel that is set in Ireland, and it follows a young girl called Sorcha and her 7 brothers when their father is bewitched by a new wife, and she puts a spell on the 7 brothers that only Sorcha can lift. Sorcha then goes on a long journey across the waters that takes her into the enemy's foreign land. So this book was first brought to my attention last year when, for some reason, tons of booktubers started reading it and loving it. I know my friend Petra over at Petra U loves this book, and I know Ashley from A Frolic Through Fiction really enjoyed it as well. I love me a chunky fantasy or a chunky historical novel every now and again, so mush this together and throw in some romance and you've basically got the perfect comfort read. And this was just what I wanted it to be. It was truly beautiful. I loved the story. It was very fairy tale-esque, very epic and adventure-y. The setting of ancient Ireland and the descriptions of the forests and the castles were so cool. I absolutely loved being in that world. But I was really impressed with the characters in here as well. For some reason, I expected the amazing story and all of the magic and the beautiful setting, but I didn't expect the characters to be so well thought through. Sorcha in particular was really complex. She underwent a lot of character growth, and all of the side characters as well were really great. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. The scale of everything in here is just so grand, and everything was executed really well. So yes, very impressed with this one. It was a good time, and in the end I gave it 4.5 stars. And the final book that I'm going to be talking about today is a philosophy book, and that is Symposium by Plato. If you've seen my previous video, the non-fiction book haul, you will know that I've been on a bit of a philosophy kick recently. I'm wanting to revisit some of the classic texts and also read some new contemporary philosophy. So I picked this one up by Plato, which I had never read in full before. It is pretty short and it's known as being quite accessible. It is written as a dinner party where multiple different philosophers and thinkers are all sat around and chatting about what they think the nature of love is. So I really enjoyed this one. I thought the structure was really nice. All of the different accounts had something interesting to offer. I definitely had fun reflecting upon them all. I definitely also had issues with basically all of the arguments in here, but that is no surprise. If you know anything about Plato, you probably know that he looked up to and basically loved Socrates, so it is quite commonly accepted that Socrates' views in this book are the author's own. I came away from this with quite a clear understanding of Plato's account of love, which was in line with the commonly accepted view in ancient Greece that all humans are pursuing eudaimonia. That is something that I already understood quite a bit about from studying Aristotle so much at uni, so I would call this a win. So yes, this was good fun. It definitely gave me some food for thought, and it was quite an easy introduction back into the ancient texts, I'd say. So in the end, I gave this one 4 stars. So there we go. Those are the second lot of books that I read during lockdown. Please let me know if you've read any of them and what you thought about them. Did we agree or disagree? And also let me know what you've been reading over the past couple of months. Tell me the best thing you've read. I would absolutely love to know. Thank you so much to everyone who is subscribed and leaves me comments. That honestly means so much to me. But just thank you as well, even if you aren't subscribed and you just watched this video, I really appreciate it. So I hope you're all doing well, and I look forward to chatting to you down below in the comments, and I will see you soon with a new video. Bye everyone.